Becoming a full-time freelancer in the creative industry can be one of the most terrifying journeys you will ever take, but also at the same time it can become the most rewarding and fulfilling one too. The journey can be quite brutal, and it's always going to be full of ups and downs. But the purpose of this video is not to put fear into your eyes, but instead to talk about all the things that I wish I knew when I started my filmmaking journey 7 years ago. So allow me to introduce myself. My name is Jonas, and I am a full-time filmmaker here based in Dublin, Ireland, and I've been working in the creative industry for the last 7 years. And I've made a lot of different mistakes, most of which have been quite expensive. And I would like to share these with you so that hopefully you don't make those same mistakes as me someday. So let's kick things off with something that I had to learn the hard way, and that is taxes. Yeah, they suck. But what makes them suck a little bit less is if you have a good accountant. Having a really good accountant is a surefire way to make sure that you don't make any mistakes in your creative journey as a freelancer. Having someone to look after your taxes, log all of your receipts, income and expenses is a great way to know how much you're taking in, how much you're spending, but also it's a great way to make sure that you file the correct returns and so that you don't make any mistakes when it comes to paying your taxes at the end of the year. And if you have a great accountant, they will also give you advice on what to do when hard times come around. I've heard so many stories of different friends of mine trying to file their own taxes and do their own returns, and sadly that's where the horror stories really kick off, because those mistakes can be quite expensive at the end of the year. So paying an extra couple hundred a year to have a really good accountant means that you don't have to worry about that, and they will do everything they can to find a way to minimize the amount of taxes you have to give to the government based on what your business is. So this next one is a little bit of a tough pill for me to swallow, but it's also just as important. And that is to stop buying new gear. Or well, at least not right away. Allow me to explain. Every single year, all these tech companies keep releasing newer and improved versions of the same equipment that you already have. And I know how tempting it is to buy the newest and latest camera equipment, and how we sometimes go out of our way to spend all of our money on it. But if there's one lesson I learned out of this, is that you really shouldn't do that. The last thing you want is to spend all of your money on a new camera and then be stuck for 3 months with no income and no money and with rent to pay, and all you have is a new camera, but you're not really living anymore. You're just trying to survive. And while it's a tough thing to not buy any new equipment or any of the latest technologies, it's also a great way of ensuring the longevity of your own freelancing career, because at the end of the day, it's meant to be sustainable and not something that just dies off after a couple of months because you made one bad decision. And I say this because I've made this mistake so many times, and I wouldn't want anyone else to go through the same journey that I did and how much money I lost by buying the wrong things just because they were new, but not because they were actually good for what I needed them to do. And now, after all the years of making mistakes, I gave myself a rule, which is if I can't afford 3 times the value of that item, then chances are I don't actually really need it. Or in that moment, I can't afford it and I shouldn't buy it. And a little bit of a side note, while staying on this topic of not going broke, let's talk about savings. One rule that I learned, and I learned it the hard way, but I'm so thankful that I did, is that you have to have at least 6 months of your income saved up, just in case something bad happens. You were able to survive while you figured things out and get yourself back up on your feet. And you never know, that money might come in handy when another global pandemic or something like that happens. Yeah. Anyways, when you become a freelancer, you inevitably find yourself saying yes to a few too many things. Whether it's saying yes to unrealistic expectations, impossible deadlines, or any other things like that, it's always a surefire way of being burnt out in this industry. And this is where sometimes it's okay to just say no. Burnout really sucks, and I'll be honest, more often than not, it's entirely our own fault for saying yes to too many things. I know I'm guilty of that by doing more than I should, and I know everyone else in this industry is also the same. But one thing I did learn over the last few years is that it doesn't actually have to be that way, and that it's okay to say no every once in a while to things that you don't agree with. Things that you feel like you don't want to do because you know it will affect your mental health and your mental well-being. I know it's scary saying no because we all fear that the clients are going to hate us and they're going to go leave for someone else, but I can assure you that that's not the case. If you handle it correctly and talk to them about the concerns that you have for the different projects or why you can't say yes to certain expectations or requests that they have, they will understand, and you will always find a way to work around those things together, and in the end it will always make for a better result. And on this topic of where to say no and where your boundaries lie, it's also important to know your value and know your worth. This is something that honestly took me the longest to figure out, and that's because I had to learn the value that I brought to a job. And what that really means is I had to figure out how much my time is worth, because unlike other jobs where a company will tell you how much your time is worth, for this one, you are entirely in charge of it yourself. And being 18, 19, trying to figure that out on my own, that was a little bit of a tough challenge. But I think many years later, I've found a sweet spot, and I'd like to share my experiences in knowing about this and how I went about with this. I think something that helped me the most when finding my value is experimenting with pricing until something worked that I was happy with, but at the same time that clients were happy with. And when you find that sweet spot, stick to it. Don't change it for other clients. Don't change it for this client, you'll charge them that, and this client, you'll charge them that. Find a price that works for you and stick to it across the board. Make sure to treat all clients fairly with it and try not to make too many compromises around it. Don't undervalue your work and the effort that you put in just because someone else can do it cheaper. Just because someone can't afford you right now doesn't mean that someone else won't. There's always so many jobs happening in this industry, and there's no way that you'll ever be able to take on all of them. So when it comes to that, it's important to just understand that you won't be able to work on every job, but that's okay, because you'll get to work on the jobs that are suited for you and can afford to pay you what you're worth. Sometimes a lot of projects are interesting and exciting, but the budget for them might not be there. So if you want to stick your name on something and want to do it for a little bit less of the cost, that's also totally fine. And more often than not, the really exciting and fun projects don't actually have that much budget involved. But I find for those, it's totally okay to change your prices, because who knows, maybe that's something you've always wanted to do but never had the opportunity to do. Or maybe it's something that will look great on your portfolio and you find value in those projects in a different way other than just direct monetary value. Because at the end of the day, if you're really passionate about something, you don't have to do it always just for money. You can just do it for the love of the industry that you are in. I love to film videos, I love to create videos, and the amount of projects I've done where I've been severely underpaid for what I would normally charge is beyond me remembering that. But I did them anyways because it was purely out of the love of what I want to make. It was a great way to meet new people and to just experiment where the stakes are lower and I get to try new things a little bit more. And because of all that, these things always pay off quite well in the end. And lastly, one final point I'd like to share is that success in the freelance industry, it doesn't happen overnight. Finding success in the freelance industry isn't just a case of a month or two of work. Instead, it usually takes years to foster and to develop. But it does happen. People usually just find themselves giving up right when they are so close to succeeding. Imagine freelancing like an exponential curve, or as I like to describe it, as a snowball. You place a snowball on top of a mountain and you start to let it roll. And for the first half of that mountain, it's going to take a while for it to get bigger and bigger. But the bigger it gets, the faster it gets. And over time, that snowball will turn into an avalanche. And that is what your filmmaking career is going to look like. You need to give it time and you need to wait it out. Because eventually, that small snowball of your career will turn into something so much bigger and so much more than you could ever imagine. When I got started with freelancing, I tried to rush this process because I thought if I took on more jobs and did more things and worked longer hours, it would speed up the success of my career. But in fact, it actually only did the opposite. Instead, it slowed everything down because after a long, hard year of non-stop work every single day without any breaks, I found myself completely and entirely burnt out. I was unable to work again, and it sucked. So instead of progressing me in this freelancing field, I had to completely stop and shut down for some time to just decompress and try to take a break and to rekindle the spark and excitement for working again. So it's not something that can be rushed, and it will happen when it's time for it to happen. You just have to really trust the process in that. So yeah, starting out as a freelancer is terrifying. But trust me, you're not the only one that's scared. We all are. Being a full-time freelancer allows you to be more time-rich than any other industry or job in the world. It allows you to pick and choose what type of work you want to do. It allows you to choose and set your own hours, and it also allows you to just decide when you feel like taking a break. And if it's something that appeals to you and you feel like you want to give it a go and try it yourself, then all I can say is do it. So don't back down and don't worry about what others might say. Try it yourself and just see what happens. I promise you, it will be worth it, and it will all work out in the end. Okay. Bye.